All right, guys. Welcome to another Solosode of Moments with an MEO podcast. I am going to be walking through how to get your LLC. So basically the steps that you need to take in order for you to get your LLC and be a licensed business. I think it is so important to do your research on the types of entities that you can have. There's many. There's LLC, there's S Corp, there's partnerships, there's C Corp, there is sole proprietorship. There are so many. And so today's episode is strictly on the LLC forms that you have to fill out and basically the process that you have to go through in order to get your LLC. New Altitudes, which is my company, is an LLC company because we don't move. So, for those of you who are military spouses or significant others who are not looking at moving around a lot, then an LLC is a fantastic option because you do have some legal protection if your business was to ever be sued or anything like that. If you move around a lot, I have spoken with Caitlin Eldridge, who's going to be on an episode coming up about your very first taxes appointment. She is a CPA and a military spouse. She actually recommends, or she says that it makes a lot of sense for military spouses who do move a lot to be a sole proprietorship, simply because it doesn't tie you to a state. However, every entity, I believe, has its pros and its cons. And the big con of being a sole proprietor instead of an LLC is that there's no legal protection. This means that if your business is ever sued, then everything you own, including your personal finances and your house, if you guys own a house together, anything is up for grabs in that lawsuit. So, because of that, I personally recommend an LLC. I just think it's safer. It's better for the business owner because you never know. You just never know. And so, I would never want anyone to be sued or to be in a position where they might be sued. But if you don't have legal protection, that can be really scary. So, definitely, I personally recommend an LLC. The good thing is that now you do have access to funds from the government. So whenever you do move, I think it's up to $400, but it might depend on the state. So definitely look at your state in particular. But usually there is a credit where you can apply for basically a refund towards your certifications or your LLC or other business permits and licenses that you might need depending on the state and the industry. And so that actually was formed with the intent, I believe it was Michelle Obama, as when she was first lady. That was something that she did. So that is an option. So you can get refunded for your LLC, especially as you move around. So don't stress out about that too much. I just personally like the legal protection. I just feel safer with an LLC than as a sole proprietorship, but there are so many. So definitely do your research before you actually, pay the state that you're in to do that. Okay. Now, something else to consider is that if you are doing an LLC, you're doing it in the state that you are doing business in. This is huge because many times the state that we do our taxes in is our home state, and that's not always the same as the state that we are stationed at. So make sure that if you are doing an LLC, an S Corp or C Corp, anything like that where it's tied to the state, that you get it in the state that you are doing business in. Okay? Because you can get into a lot of trouble and your LLC can be nulled if they find out that you're doing it incorrectly. Okay? All right. So let's walk through the steps on how to get your LLC. And I'm going to answer common questions that I get asked from clients as I go along. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do is pick a business name. Now, I want to caution you that you want to pick a business name that does not already exist and does not already have a trademark, because it won't get passed. And if it does, you can get sued for using someone else's name. So make sure that you do a quick search. Go to your favorite social media platforms, go to Google, and just type it in and see what pops up. So when I was thinking about new altitudes, I really had to sit down and go, okay, this is a cool idea. And then I would Google it and see what I could find. You can also check out TESS, which is, it stands for the Trademark Electronic Search System. And your state should also have a database of registered trademarks and like pending trademark applications. And that's by the US Patent and Trademark Office. So you should have access to databases that you can actually look this up and say, hey, I really like this name. Is it taken yet? But also check social media, check blog posts, and check for a website. Check for, newaltitudes.com and see if it exists. Because if it already exists, it's going to be harder for people to find you later on, because they're going to be redirected to somebody else's website. And we don't want that either. Okay. Another great database that you can check is Whois. It's capital WHOIS. And it's a handy tool for performing searches as far as like domain names and things like that. So highly recommend that you do that. Also realize that you can get a DBA, which is doing business as, means that you don't have to, like, if you really love your social handle, maybe your Instagram is Too Cool for School and that's already a trademarked business name, that's fine. You can pick a different name for your actual LLC, for your actual business, and then just include a DBA, a doing business as form, to show that on everything, this is what it's going to look like, even though, just like basically like, this is my other name and this is how I'm going to register myself. Now, also pay attention that each state does have restrictions to be used as an LLC name. For example, words such as like bank or insurance are usually restricted by most states. You can actually check your state's list of restricted words to make sure that your chosen business name doesn't contain any words that it shouldn't. So you can actually check that out along with existing trademarks. So just some things to keep in mind when it does come to creating a name that not only resonates and makes sense, but also isn't already taken. Another thing that I would caution you is, if you're going to use that name on your social media accounts, on your website, etc., make sure that it is easy to spell. Could a fifth grader spell it without you helping? The reason I say this is sometimes we get so caught up or, so into it that we forget about how it's going to come across. If somebody just hears your business name, how are they going to find you afterwards? So I had a client who we were doing a one-on-one, and she was like, I've been doing a lot of PR, but like nobody is coming from those sources. And turns out her last name was super hard to spell. And she used her first and her last name on everything, including her website. So she changed things up, made it a little bit easier to find her. And sure enough, the traffic picked up and things started moving. And that's simply because if it's too hard to spell, people aren't going to sit there and do a 15-minute search to try to find you. They're going to search, and if you don't pop up right away, they're going to move on. So making it easy for your audience or a potential audience to find you is just as important, which may be where a DBA comes in hand. So she did not end up changing her LLC. She didn't go and like file a new LLC, change her business name completely. She just went and filed a DBA, doing business as form, and said, from now on, this is what everything will show up as. And she bought the domain to match. So it is possible to work around that if you really want like your first and your last name to be part of it. But just realize that there's a big difference between the last name Baker and a last name Lanza, for instance. I'm constantly getting asked how you spell my last name, even though I think my last name is pretty easy. My family's maiden name is Friend, spelled just like friend. So that would be easy. But someone else with a last name like, oh gosh. Okay. So I had a boyfriend like a long time ago. His last name was Muckenthaler. Like, don't have that as your LLC name if it's going to be like your web. Like, you don't want anybody typing that in as your website name. Like, no, just don't do it. Don't do it. Make it easy on your audience and on you. Like, let's be real. Okay. So once you have your name picked out, you're going to fill out the form and actually pay the fee. You can do this. It's usually online on your state government website, but I do have the articles that I used to complete this and that I use for my clients. In this, you can click on each state. One of these articles has every state listed out, and you can just click on that and it literally just pulls up your state. So whatever state you're in, if you're trying to get your LLC, just click the link in the show notes and you can find it. And I'll make sure that that is clearly labeled. So the articles of organization are also known as your certificate of formation. Depending on what state you're in, it might call it one or the other. It means the same thing. Basically, this is where you're like, okay, this is my business name. This is what I do. This is how I'm going to help people or what I'm going to sell. This is how I plan on making money. And this is like basically the fee that you have to pay per the state. Again, if you're filling this out for the second or the third time, then it is refundable. So just make sure you get a receipt and you hold on to that and ask the government for it back. So the articles of organization, it was really simple to fill out. It wasn't like crazy chaotic from what I remember 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago, but it is different. I mean, it's a whole state form. So just make sure that you give yourself time and grace to get through that form and make sure that you do your research beforehand so that you know what to put in so that you don't have to go and pay that fee again to change it. Okay. So while you're filling out that form, it's going to ask you to designate a registered agent. What the heck is a registered agent? A registered agent is basically the person who gets all the paperwork and the mail for the business from the government. So this is like your, yay, congrats, you're officially an LLC. This is your, don't forget taxes are due or like whatever. All right. Now, a lot of times LLCs will have the registered agent be someone who is like part of the business. That's cool. Like you can totally do that. Like if you're the CEO and it's just you, maybe you're the registered agent. If you go through another platform, like say you're like, screw this. I don't want to do all of this work. Like I want a company to do it for me. I personally, the first time around, I went through Zen Business. And so they can also sign up to be like, you can have them be your registered agent. And I think I paid like $12 for a year for them to like get the mail for me. And they just let me know. They send me an email with like important updates. So if you don't want to deal with it, you can have someone else do it. It doesn't have to be someone who's part of your LLC. Fun fact. It can be someone who is just, like your advisor or something like that. Okay. Member versus manager management. So another thing on this form is basically who the heck manages your company. Most LLCs are member driven, especially if you are like the only person who's associated. Like if you don't have employees, it makes sense. However, some LLCs have like a board of directors. And so therefore it would be manager management because those people who are outside of the company manage it. So you'll have to decide, do you want to manage it? Do you want someone else to manage it? How do you want that to look on paper? Now, The next thing on my list is an operating agreement. It's not required in every state, but it's still a good idea to have. So you're going to want to draft an operating agreement if it's a requirement. And honestly, I would just recommend doing it even if it's not a requirement. Basically, this operating agreement is saying, okay, this is who's in charge. This is how much each person in this company owns of the company, or their voting rights, like their voting percentage. Like, do some people have more say in what happens in the business than others? Are you doing this alone? Like, what does it look like when you make profit? Who's going to benefit from else to consider? And I actually didn't consider it. I didn't do this because I didn't hear about this until later. But I know of someone who has a podcast. I was listening to her podcast, and I will not like shout her out because I don't know if she actually genuinely wants like a whole bunch of people to know about this. So I was listening to her podcast, and she was talking about how she is going through a divorce. She formatted her LLC while she was married. And so, therefore, in the divorce, her husband, and again, this is not a military couple, like this is just someone that I know of. Her husband was trying to get half of her company in the divorce settlement. And it ended up working that way because basically the state looks at it like, well, your husband helped you get there. Even if they played no part in it, your spouse is still considered to be like your support system, and like they were there for you while you were doing that. Maybe they were an employee. So I would have an operating agreement, and you might even want to do a prenup for your business specifically if you're not married yet. And if you are married, there's such a thing called a post-nup. And basically, it's like, I guess, kind of frowned upon, but like YOLO. But it's basically where, like, okay, we're already married, but I'm going to be creating this business. And if something were to happen and we were to get divorced, and I don't wish that on anybody, but if we were to get divorced, you can't sue me for half of my company. Because if you grow this business, like I know, you're just starting out now. So maybe like $20 sales seems really big for you. Maybe $100 seems really cool. Maybe you're at the 1,000, 2,000 a month mark, which is fantastic. But imagine if you made six figures next year. Imagine if you made $1 million. Imagine if you became a millionaire from this small business. Like, whatever you do, you set up your business for such success that you become a millionaire, and then things don't work out. And again, I don't wish that on anybody, but what if? What if you went through a divorce 6, 10, 15 years from now, you're a millionaire, and you did all this work, and your spouse tries to get half of or more of your company in a divorce settlement? So just something to think about. Again, I didn't even know that this was a thing until I listened to her podcast episode a few months ago. Nick and I have not filed a post-nup at this point. Like, if I get big enough, we might consider just like going to a lawyer, sitting down and writing up like our own little contract of like what he could take me for. I don't know. I don't know how that would work because I don't see us getting a divorce, but you just never know. I mean, I don't think anybody walks into marriage going, yep, hope we get divorced in 10 years. That's not a thing. So just something to keep in mind. So operating agreements, they're not always required, but still a good idea. But every state is different. So make sure you check your state requirements. All right, we're almost done here. Now, some states or even some counties within states require a publication. I know, like, what the heck is that? Basically, it means that certain states or certain counties within states require that you tell the newspaper and you put an announcement in the newspaper that you are a small business and that you are official. There are also time limit requirements. So some counties or some states require that you do this every 6 months or every year. I'm fortunate. I live in Pima County. If you're stationed here at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, Pima County does not require a publication requirement. So I didn't have to do this, but certain states and even certain counties do require it. So make sure that you look for that on the form and look for that on the state website and see if you need it. All right, two more things, and then we're done with our LLC. So, there may be business permits or licenses that you need in conjunction with an LLC. Now, of course, this depends on the state, the industry, and other factors. So, like if you are a food company, like maybe you do macarons, like our friend Shannon at Toot Sweet Macarons, you may need to have another business permit or even a business license in order to do that, such as like a state licensed kitchen facility or other requirements. So make sure that you look at that. That's again based on your state and your industry, as well as other factors like what, not just your industry, but like what kind of food you sell, where you ship to, etc. So just keep that in mind that there may be other permits and licenses that you need, and that's all going to be on your state website. Lastly, I highly recommend that you obtain an EIN or a TIN and you open up a business bank account. This is huge, okay? And I'm going to explain why. So, an EIN, is an IRS employer identification number. It's basically like your number by the state that lets you open up a business bank account. I mean, it's a lot more in depth than that, but basically that's why you need it, is that it's, and a TIN is just like your tax identification number. So now you still need an EIN to open up a business bank account. You need this to open up HoneyBook. If you're going to use HoneyBook to manage your influx of cash, anything like that. And basically, you must obtain an EIN for your LLC. So there is no filing fee for an EIN, and you can do that right on the IRS website. I will say Zen Business tried to charge me $100 to fill out the form for me. And I thankfully have a dad who's in entrepreneurship. And so he told me not to do that, that it was a waste of money and that you could do it really easy. It took me like less than 5 minutes to do it. So I just did it on my own. Save yourself $100 and just do it yourself. But basically, that's how you get, it's better for you to have your own business bank account. And here's why. It is better to have a business bank account because if your business, even with an LLC, does get sued, you don't want your personal finances wrapped up in that. Okay. So if the joint account that my husband and I have was also my business bank account, what could happen is if I ever did get sued, which knock on wood, I don't, but if I ever did, it meant that our entire joint savings is wrapped up in that. It's also a lot harder to, when it comes to tax time and bookkeeping, like it's a lot harder to sit down and say, okay, like this was a personal expense versus this, which was a business expense. And I can totally tell the difference between these two Amazon charges. Like it's just a lot and we don't need that. So just have a business bank account. It's usually free to open up a business bank account or maybe like $20 annual fee, like nothing crazy. And it's just safer for you as far as like lawsuits go, but also as far as just, being able to figure out your taxes so that you don't get, in trouble with the IRS or anything crazy. So I highly recommend that you do have an EIN. You can also use a TIN, your tax identification number, as long as it's registered to your business. So you can do that as well. But most places, like I know HoneyBook was a pain in the butt when I tried to use it. I personally found it very difficult to use. I did not like it. I liked Dubsado a lot better. But I got my EIN for HoneyBook specifically so that I could set everything up, and it was just a mess trying to get it set up. So having an EIN right off the bat just kind of saves you, and it literally takes 5 minutes. Like, it was so quick, so easy, and it didn't cost anything to do. So don't pay somebody to do that for you. You can easily do that, and it's definitely not worth $100 for them to do it. Okay, so that is the quick and dirty how to get an LLC in your various state. Again, check the show notes because I did link 3 articles that I used not only to craft this podcast, but also articles that I send to my clients when they have questions. And in that, the second article does link you to the different states that you can just literally click on the state that you're stationed in or living in currently, and it will pull up that state site for you so that you don't have to worry about trying to go find the right one. So definitely use this. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Send me an email, newaltitudesllc@gmail.com, or you can go to Instagram at new_altitudes and just send me a DM. I would love to chat with you. I would love to help you through this. If you're debating between an LLC and another entity, go talk to a CPA, an accountant, or an attorney, because I am not going to be able to help you figure out what is best for you, but your attorney or your accountant would. So I am not an accountant. This is just how I walk my clients through the LLC process and how I help them get what they need. Another thing is, please check the show notes because we have a downloadable PDF that you can download that has these steps written out and that has more things that you can fill out as far as like your operating agreement. It's going to have some tips for you, things to think about, things like that. So definitely check the show notes for the PDF download. All right, guys, take care. And if you haven't yet, and you're on a platform that does reviews, please write a review. I would love it if you would write a review. It's really hard to get reviews on podcasts, but it tells me that somebody actually likes this content. So if you found this episode to be helpful, if you found it to be encouraging, or if you found it to be a mess, let me know in a review. I would love to know. Thanks. Take care.